Hello, and thank you for meeting with me.
Good evening.
Okay, please state your name and occupation.
My name is Rajiv Bhattacharya. I am a financial economist.
Okay. What made you want to leave India, or what were some push factors that caused you to leave initially?
Well, actually, my intentions of leaving India were simply to get a fabulous higher education, to get my doctorate, and then to go back to teach in India. I was not really, in my mind, in 1988, I really wasn't leaving India. I was going for education and coming back. India was a free democracy. There were no exit restrictions, but it was also a socialist economy, and opportunities were quite limited. Um, Although I didn't fully appreciate the incredible value of economic freedom, I knew the value of political freedom. I did not quite appreciate the value of economic freedom until I came to the U.S. and I came to the US right at the end of the administration of our greatest president, Ronald Reagan, and, uh, and watched his farewell speech, watched a lot of his work. And, um, and it was during, I'm thinking in 1989, there was a court decision on that flag burning was perfectly legal in the US. And to me, that was an absolutely, mind-boggling statement. Burning your national flag, that is so incredibly offensive. And yet, our great country says, that's okay. You can burn it because that is free speech. I'm like, wow, that is freedom. The freedom, as Salman Rushdie, the great Indian British author, famously said, the freedom to be inoffensive is no freedom at all.
Mhm. Uh, what were some difficulties you faced as a new resident in a new country?
I somehow remember it not being very difficult. Uh, uh, in terms of, I loved the intellectual ferment in the economics department at the University of Rochester. Everything was up to question. It was all about great ideas, questioning everything. The biggest challenge for me was the financial challenge. My parents were absolutely not in any position to, even though they led a reasonably middle class lifestyle in India, but the exchange rates being what they were and the very socialist system that we had in India, I came to the US literally with $500. Uh, and while I was on a scholarship, on a fellowship from the department, it was quite difficult to make ends meet. Another interesting thing that I saw is I developed a very strong appreciation for the American work ethic. Um, for us, for instance, we would, if I had an exam, let's say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my initial instinct was, okay, I'll skip the morning class and just prepare for the exam. Um, to most Americans, that was not an acceptable solution. It was like, no, I have a class, I have to attend it. And that's that. That's it. Why else are you coming to do a PhD if you're not going to attend every single class and do every single assignment to the fullest extent? Uh, so, these are times when you realize why this country is the greatest country in the history of the world. It is the people, it is our systems, it's our institutions, it's our constitution that has made this country the innovative hub of the world. Where else do you have Silicon Valley? Where else do you have MIT? Where else do you have the University of Chicago? Where else do you have Stanford University? So, so that was um, what I developed over the course of my graduate school was understanding the importance of hard work. When we were growing up in India, we were almost kind of the effortless elegance was celebrated. Like, oh, he's so smart. He doesn't have to do any hard work. He's, coasts along. He doesn't. That's not how Americans do things. Hard work is appreciated here. And so okay, you can do without hard work. that's not necessarily a compliment. So this kind of idea of taking things seriously, that education, think of it as a job. You've got to do the best you can. Um, I was a bit too young, I think, to be in a doctoral program. Intellectually, I was probably ready, but emotionally, I don't think I was. So it's that because a doctoral program is extremely self-motivated, unless because nobody's cracking a whip on you. You either do it or you don't, and if you don't, you leave. Nobody's going to stop you. Nobody's going to come and say, why aren't you doing it? It just doesn't work. Graduate school, you're a grown up at that point. Um, so, so it, you know, that self motivation, it, the discipline that requires took me a little bit of time to acquire, and that was, I must admit, quite challenging. Um, but it was an incredible learning experience. Wouldn't give it up for the world.
Right. Um, Other than grad school, were there any other pull factors that made you want to come to America?
That in a democracy, we the people are sovereign. Government is not there to tell us what to do. Governments are not there. Government employees are not there to help me or help us. That's what families and communities are for. The only role of government is to serve us, the people. We are not their servants. And that was a very, very liberating feeling. Now, freedom, of course, is not unconstrained. Freedom comes with responsibilities. And that's what I think the American work ethic and the American institutions are so strong in combining freedom and responsibilities.
Okay. Um, could you explain some of the differences between India and the US?
Well, I mean, India is a much, much, much poorer country than India, than the US. Even now, I think the GDP per capita of the US is about 10 times, I think, that of India. And although India, when I left in 1988, you know, was a really a socialist backwater. And in 1991, when India was basically on the verge of default, they were forced to liberalize. And this liberalization, which was kind of, you might say, an Americanization of the Indian economy. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, political freedom was always there. It was economic freedom that was not there. And there was this appreciation that, well, we have to we have to see what works. And clearly, the American model has worked for the world, for America. And so kind of reduction of bureaucracy, streamlining of processes, private sector being allowed to enter, like energy sector, steel, automobiles, and universities. And as a result, what we have seen over the last 33 years in India is an absolute um, um, just an absolute explosion in economics and entrepreneurialism. Um, but going back to answer your question, when I left India, uh, you know, uh, okay, I'm going to step back for a second. These are things that I later constructed because, as I mentioned, in 1988, I really wasn't thinking in those terms. But later, when I thought about it, we often say that the NBA is the way out of the ghetto for many African American kids. In the same way, the PhD was the way out of the ghetto for a smart Indian kid like me. um, what choices did we have really? What opportunities did we have? And as I was discussing with a Russian friend of ours recently, we had no second choices, second chances. You either got it right the first time, or that's it. No second chances. There's nobody holding your hand. It was so the idea of socialism being kind of a caring environment is so not consistent with the facts. The US, you fail, you try, you fail, you try, you fail, you try, you fail, and then you succeed. So like Silicon Valley is completely based on the idea fail quick, fail big, and then move on and do other and go on to do your next thing. So that celebration of entrepreneurialism. I mean, in 1988, when I left India, the kind of default assumption, especially because the socialist viewpoint was so prevalent, that somebody who got rich must have done it by exploiting the poor. To see how all of that came together in how the American economy, the American political system worked.
And how long have you been in America for?
So 1988 to 1995, so 7 years, and then 2001 to 2022, another 21 years, so 28 years in the U.S.
So carrying on with that, how do you feel about your decisions to immigrate? Do you have any regrets or anything like that?
Yes, my biggest regret is I could not spend time with my mother before she passed. Um, she died in 1991 when I was in graduate school. I was able to fly back to India for her funeral, but I was very, very close to my mother, very, very close. I completely model my parenting on my mother, um, but I never got to, say goodbye, and that was horrible. Apart from that, no regrets. No.
Perfect. Uh, Thank you. That'll be all. Thank you so
Uh,
much.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.